said, my name is Jan Bushman. I'm a buildings archaeologist working for Water Armstrong Archaeology in Carlisle. And it's this job that brought me to the topic at hand, Ulverston's breweries, a lost heritage or time for revival. The following presentation will take a short look at the brewing history of Ulverston's old breweries. Even though Ulverston's historic breweries are not in use anymore, the town still retains its character as a traditional brewing town. So what can current archaeological methods do to help sustain or document these historical and industrial buildings? The area of Ulverston, Cumbria, has a modern settlement pattern, but it still displays some elements of its medieval origin within its landscape. The presence of industrial features within the town is particularly notable, but correlates with the historic growth of the town in the 19th and 20th century. Ulverston is a town which has a long brewing history influencing its historic character. Its breweries were prominent features of the town landscape since the mid-18th century. Across the country, the 17th century brought a rapid increase in the amount of commercial brewers, with a concentration in larger cities such as London, Edinburgh, or in Burton. Rising regulations increasingly influenced the design and the brewing process from the 17th century. This includes imposing a strict regulation of the building's design and a detailed documentation of every brewing process. The large-scale porter brew houses from the late 18th century were already built on an industrial scale. So huge vats and warehouses were needed to maintain the increased production and demand for porter. The buildings were usually more functional and often decoration-free in their appearance. With the development of the steam engine, which lessened the issue of gravity within the brewing process, it was possible to design breweries with up to half a dozen or more stories. Other industries, such as the malting industry and the cask production, were strongly interwoven with the development of the brewery. Ulverston was the home of two breweries, the Old Brewery, which is circled to the right, and the new brewery, also called the Gill Brewery, to the north west.
And you've not been drinking.
East and west is always difficult. Both breweries, which were not of a London size, still dominated the town landscape of Ulverston. They were among the largest industrial sites within the town. The Gill Brewery had been in existence since at least 1751, when it was owned by the Claw family. The new brewery was situated at Brook Street in the Gill in the northwest of Ulverston. Yeah. Ulverston's two breweries were continuous in their production of beers and ales. Also, the ownership of the Gill Brewery chain was passed through a succession of owners from 1763, including individuals such as John Robinson, Benson, and then Askew family, before it was bought by the Yarker family in 1800. It was sold again to the Robinson family, with no relation to the Frederick Robinson, who currently owns the Old Brewery, in 1834. By 1908, the Gill Brewery had changed their trade to a wine and spirit business, but bottler and mineral water manufacturer. The Old Brewery in Ulverston was, in comparison, medium-sized brewery dating from the 18th century. However, the majority of the larger-scale buildings that we see today were added in the 19th century. Following the inscription on a date stone, now situated at the east range of the courtyard, the brewery was established by the site by 1755 by John Booth and James Machell. However, the date of the probably earliest structures on the site is unknown. However, an abstract of a typed map dated to 1833 refers to an old brewery field situated at Hart Street, which presumably refers to the land north of the main brewery building, which is shown on the plan, the Wood's town map of 18 1932. This first depiction of the brewery building shows the complex as three ranges grouped around a courtyard to the east side of the brewery street, which, do we have a mouse? Is this building, and the old brewery field is presumably the area behind the brewery. By 1890, this area had been urbanized, the brewery had been enlarged, and an enclosed yard with some outbuildings has been created. Several plans for extension works to the brewery were commissioned by John Booth in 1882. He extended the brewery several times. In 1878, 2 houses north of the complex became part of the brewery by being converted into a cellar and an office. And in 1882, a new boiler house, brew house, chimney stack, and cistern room were added. It was the 17th July 1896 before the firm of Hartleys came into existence, when Robert and Peter Hartley of Burnley bought the Old Brewery and its 11 full licensed houses, 14 beer houses, and 31 associated cottages. Shortly after that, they also purchased the Gill Brewery from its Leeds-based owner. In early September 1896, the 2 breweries became fully integrated, and Hartley's Ulverston Limited was born. They commissioned the construction of a large stable complex with harness room, garages, 2-story hopback, and a 3-story addition to the brewing tower. The presence of the stable suitable for up to 16 horses indicates that the brewery was reliant on dray horses for delivering its beer by wagon to local public houses. Dray horses were commonly used by breweries for local deliveries well into the 20th century. By 1800, nearly all of the large-scale breweries in Britain had been mechanized, and in the early years of the 19th century, most became steam-powered. At the Old Brewery, there is a reference in 1882 to the building of a new boiler house, which suggests that there had been an earlier one supplying steam power. Little is documented about the Old Brewery in the first half of the 20th century. It remained Hartley's Brewery until 1982, when it was bought by Robinson of Stockport, who are still in possession of the brewery. In 1970s, Hartley's added a new boiler house with a chimney to the rest, which is still really nicely seen on the picture. Further additional buildings were constructed in the late 20th century. Alterations from 1980s and the 1990s are known for the mid-18th century terrace houses, which are associated with a brewery. Hartley's and its tall chimney were a constant feature of Ulverston until 1991, when brewing operation stopped and at the site. The buildings continue to be used as storage for a while, and the redundant chimney was demolished. It used to be standing right in the corner of the red building. Now the site is deserted and is awaiting redevelopment. It's not just the brewing business that had been influenced. There were numerous Hartley's pubs in Ulverston, such as the Canal Tavern, the Cattle Market, Globe, Kings and Arms, all of which are now gone. However, while both of the original 18th century breweries have been abandoned and reused, there appears to be still the need to maintain and revive the nearly 300-year-old tradition of brewing. Early in 2006, the first new brewery was set up on the outskirts of Ulverston. The old stone building that now houses the Ulverston Brewing Company are Victorian and date back to the 1875. It was a purpose-built indoor cattle market which provided an essential service to farmers for around 85 years before it became the home of Cumbria crystal until 1999. between then and 2006, it remained unoccupied and derelict, and deteriorated until it was bought by Paul Swan and Anita Garnett, who revived it and created a brewery at the heart of their hometown in Ulverston. The original inspiration was the closure of the old Hartley's brewery, and they wanted to produce a replacement for their locally brewed beer and the much loved Hartley's beer. The 5-barrel plant came from the closed Whitley Bridge brewery and had been used to create a wide range of beers, and they're mostly named in tribute to one of Ulverston's most famous son, Stan Laurel, and some of the beers are called the Love and Gravy, Lonesome Pine, and Harvest Moon, in honor of Stan Laurel and the Hardy films. A second smaller brewery, the Stringer's Brewery Company, also opened their doors in Ulverston. However, they are situated in a modern business park to the southeast of Ulverston, so therefore now they specialized on various craft beers, and while these new brewery buildings are not historical or purpose-built as such, they show that Ulverston still wants to retain their brewing tradition. So that brings us to the question, what can archaeology do? The buildings of the Old Brewery were assessed for listing in 2010. They were rejected as they failed to match the given criteria of architectural significance, intactness, design, and group value. One of the main reasons for the rejection was the significant modern changes these buildings underwent, and an inconsistency in material and style of the existing buildings. Industrial buildings often fail to the assessment for listing, and working buildings that are modernized and changed continues. This is sadly inevitable. But what else can archaeology do to help conserve these buildings? Should listing be adjusted in case of historical industrial buildings? Buildings such as the Old Brewery for the years, thus retaining some of the buildings justifies the change of use and the loss of some of the structures. I'm of divided opinion, since of course it would be best if a building was if a building retains as it was intended. But it's definitely good to see it being used and not falling into a derelict state. It can be seen as part of the constant development a building goes through over time. I have described previously how the building has changed over time, and it's the change that which has stopped its listing. So should we stop the change to save what remains, or and if we believe that it's a compromise worth making, how do we decide at which stage it's appropriate to reuse or to save? Or it's by studying it with the archaeology of the building, which can inform us how we can conserve the building for the future. It's there to identify what's significant about the building, what should be retained and what should be sacrificable, and after being recorded, of course, and to make the building viable for future use. It's through recording and interpretation that we can understand the significance of, in terms of character, fabric, setting, history, design and style and use of the building. Every development will of course bring a change to Ulverston's urban character, and they may lose a part of their iconic and their historic feature of the town centre. Ulverston's intangible brewing heritage is however maintained through the continuous beer production, thanks to the 2 new breweries and possibly more breweries in the future. But its tangible heritage in the form of the traditional breweries is on their decline. The original buildings disappear and they are replaced by modern plants, which are often not distinguishable from other factory structures. They do not contribute in the same way to the its character as the traditional buildings would. So from a buildings archaeologist point of view, the loss of the historic fabric is of course problematic. It would be ideal if the building remained in the same setting as a uniform structure with its original function. The ideal situation is, however, rarely possible and often not sustainable in current times. There's definitely a good. Therefore, it's definitely good to see them being reused and so at least a part of them retained. It can be seen as part of the constant development a building goes through over time, which adds to their unique character. Modern changes should not always be seen as a negative impact upon a building. The documentation of all fabrics at least supports the creation of a growing database of these industrial buildings. This may be the foundation of a change within the system and supports the increasing appreciation and interest not only of archaeologists but also of the local population into the growing heritage of Britain.